We had a world at StFX where we operated consensually, where we worked out our differences, where you might be of different political persuasions, but you had the commonality of living together at StFX. And quite frankly, if we could take the magic sauce that is StFX and sprinkle a little of it around the rest of the world would be a better place.
It was the first time in my life that I had an opportunity to engage with people who had wildly different life experiences and upbringing as compared to my own life experience. It was the first time that I met people who came from different parts of the country, different parts of the world, who were all seeking to get something different out of their university experience. And it's when you have the opportunity to actually meet and engage with people who have a different, not necessarily better or worse, but different life experience, different worldview than you do, that you realize that there are incredible opportunities out there to do big things, to have an impact.
Smaller classes obviously is a benefit. Having top-notch talent teaching you is a benefit. Having an administration that cares about your well-being, I think that's a benefit as well. And at the end of the day, you do get to belong to this incredible network of alumni who not only say that they're there to help you, but oftentimes will go out of their way. If you're wearing your X-ring, it seems to be that bat signal to other Severians saying, I'm here if you need some help.
One of the things that just was astounding to me was when I showed up as a newly elected member of Parliament. I was one of 8 members of Parliament from StFX University. This is by relative standards, a small university in Canada that was punching way above its weight. For me, it's an automatic network of people who don't just share a common bond, but are actually willing to do something to help you.
I think StFX produces good leaders because you are in an environment where you are challenged, and not just challenged by your professors, but challenged by your fellow students. A good leader should have humility. And the students that I meet, and the faculty that I talk to, assumptions are challenged. Debate is civil. People change their minds. Those things are increasingly vital in a functioning and healthy democracy. So we can't take any of that for granted anymore. And these aren't just luxuries. They are essential. And bottom line is the world needs more StFX.
On behalf of our board chair, Dennis Flood, and on behalf of our Chancellor, Mila Mulrooney, I welcome you to today's events. The title of today's talk, Canada and US Relations, Navigating Chaos, Threats and Disruption from the White House. I hope that gets you just to stop for 30 seconds. Our world has changed. This is a massive moment of change for Canada and for the rest of the world. And like these times happen, you need leadership. You need those with experience to give you a line to move forward, to give you the confidence that we can see a path. Today, we have such people with us, leaders who will share their experience with us to help try and navigate this chaos that is erupting around us. And why am I so proud about that? Because they're all StFX grads, every one of them. And what is it about that place, StFX? Rural Nova Scotia, a small university of 5,000 undergraduate students mostly, in a town of 4,500 people, coming together in what is, I will say, a unique, immersive environment. Of course, it's built on strong academics. It has to be. Every university worth its salt has to have strong academics. And we pride ourselves on that. But it's so much more. It is that immersion, that crucible of living together that is the StFX secret. We call it a secret sauce. And you've already heard Seamus say the world needs more of it. I think they're right. That living together from an early stage brings people to positions where they have to work out their differences. There's nowhere to go. You have to sort it out. You can't fall out with that many people. You actually have to sort it out. And they do. And it's our job as the leaders of the institution and our alumni to guide this next generation forward. It is a unique place. So unique that people want to maintain the very special nature of the institution. In 1955, a 16-year-old arrived in StFX. Before him had been one Alan J. McKercher. Before him had also been Lowell Murray. That 16-year-old was Brian Mulrooney. 16 he arrived, entered that crucible of learning, entered that political milieu that was StFX. Doesn't matter what the stripe was. This was the interaction. This was the building of character. This was the journey that our 18th Prime Minister took. To the point at which he always wanted more of that for Canadians. And he went out of his way to ensure that it would happen. He helped us to create the Brian Mulrooney Institute of Government, which is a co-sponsor of today's event. But importantly, within that Brian Mulrooney Institute of Government is a public policy and governance program that is preparing future generations of leaders for this country. People who will look to public service at all levels and step up to the plate to make a difference. Now in Canada, we need our future generations to make a difference for all of us. The world has changed. It isn't as it was. And future generations will have the skills and the abilities to move forward. They, together with the experience they have at the Frank McKenna Leadership School, are the cornerstones of how we will move society forward. The McKenna Centre is about social change and social justice. It's what makes StFX different. We talk about we, not I. What will I do? No. We talk about we and the giving back to community. That is a cornerstone of who we are. That will not change. And we are here for the long haul. Our values have not changed since the days of Moses Cody and Tompkins. That is giving back to the people. That is what we were formed to do. That is the Mulrooney legacy, and it's such a pleasure to see Caroline and Nicholas with us today from the Mulrooney family. Thank you for being here. Now, today's speakers are all X-ring wearers, and as I welcome to the stage, I ask that they come up and take a seat. I'm going to begin with the Honourable Frank McKenna, class of 1970, Deputy Chairman of TD Bank and former Premier of New Brunswick and Canada's Ambassador to the United States. Frank, welcome. The Honourable Lisa Raitt, StFX class of 1989, Vice Chair of Global Investment Banking, CIBC, and the former Deputy Leader of the Conservative Party and Cabinet Minister, and current Vice Chair of the Board of Governors of StFX. So lucky to have you. Thank you, Lisa. And the Honourable Seamus O'Regan, StFX class of 1992. Yes, Seamus, the world needs more people like you as well. Thank you. It's wonderful. Member of Parliament, St John's, South Mount Pearl, Newfoundland and Labrador, and former Minister of Labour and Minister of Seniors. Recently announced as Senior Business Advisor, Stuart McKelvey. Welcome, Seamus. And to moderate and guide us through today's conversation, which I'm sure is going to be very good, we have Dr. Asa McKercher, Professor in the StFX Brian Mulrooney Institute of Government and the Stephen K. Hudson Chair in Canada-US Relations. We're grateful to have his expertise with us today. Asa, I will hand it over to you. Thank you.
A pleasure to be here. I imagine you're here partly because of our distinguished panel and partly because of the topic. So we have a number of questions I think that I'd like to ask about the state of Canada-US relations, but we're going to ask about the election as well, because of course I imagine, no. I guess it is a sort of a starting point. I mean, I'm teaching a course on Canada-US relations right now. The sort of young people in my class do not take for granted in a way that I did growing up in the 1980s that free trade is a fact of life in Canada-US relations. And so I wonder, there's some young people here, and so I wonder what you'd say to young people about the current state of the bilateral relationship, particularly in economic terms, and, there's Mulrooney's here. So, Mr. Mulrooney, I think, encouraged us to take a leap of faith on free trade in 1988. I think, as a specialist in Canada relations, that was a great leap of faith to take. But my students aren't convinced necessarily of that. So I wonder what you'd say to young people today about the state of bilateral trade and economic relations.
Okay, can you hear me now? Yeah. Well, you're turning to me because I'm one of the only people in Canada that was actually alive and around and signed that free trade agreement back in 1989, I think, when we actually signed it. And it was one of a number of extraordinary initiatives from Prime Minister Mulroney that were transformational for Canada, quite frankly. And I say that with Nick and Caroline and Andrew here. I miss your dad every day. I just wish he were here now acting as a Sherpa in the relationship, which he did with the previous administration of Donald Trump. He was extraordinary. But I'm going to jump to the question very quickly. The country was divided, deeply divided around that issue. Not as premiers, we all were civil to each other, but we were deeply divided. I ended up supporting the free trade agreement along with Robert Bourassa, I think, the only two Liberals. We supported the free trade agreement. Brian Mulroney actually had an election on that, which is a rare thing in this country, where you actually run an election on an issue and get a mandate. And as a result of that, there was a mandate for free trade. And in my view now, but my colleagues can chime in, there's not a political party in Canada that's not completely aligned around a free trade agenda for the country. And it just shows you how extraordinary the growth has been in that public policy initiative, because it's been good for us. It's been good for America. It's been good for Mexico. And I believe the rising tide has lifted all boats. And if it weren't for characters trying to change the course of history, that we would continue in this country to be strongly supportive of free trade. The only difference now, and I'll close on this, is that the partner that we trusted with a free trade agreement that we signed a contract on, both in 1989 and then NAFTA, and then with CUSMA, the best deal ever negotiated. We signed binding contracts on all of that. We made decisions based on that, and now we feel betrayed, and we've got to find other avenues.
I'm on now too. Thank you. So you started the question with, I think, a telling example of students in your class, because one of my takeaways in the past couple of weeks, looking at polling, and David Collado had a really interesting poll out this morning, and he was asking different demographics what it is that matters to them in this election. And if you're over 55, of which I'm there, you're not, because you don't get your pension yet. I do. Thank you, Canadian citizens. If you are over 55, what you really do care about is what we're talking about Trump and tariffs and what it means to the economy and free trade. And those are the things that matter. If you are between the ages of 18 and 30, what you're really caring about, 33%, is housing. And there's a real big difference between what people are caring about now versus what you care about later on in your life. And I think as a result, we have a sales job we have to do for our younger generation as to the importance of this. And I really hope that the sales job isn't going to be about showing them how bad it can be if we don't have free trade or we don't have a trade relationship with the United States, because we don't necessarily want to go down that path of economic harm. I will tell you that I think one of the more real, concrete, no pun intended, but tangible building projects in this country that is the testament to a great free trade between Canada and the United States is the project that I first met Minister Mulroney on, which is the Gordie Howe Bridge, because you were on the very first board of directors for the Gordie Howe Bridge, and it's finally coming into fruition. And it's great to see, and we need to have that actual trade going back and forth across the border. We were all in Canada. Every party has been all in Canada in making sure that we built that extra link, that extra route into the United United States. So it really is, we have to sell it to the younger generation how important this is, but as well, we have to make sure that we preserve what we can, because it's simplistic, but to have the other side of the equation where we're going to feel the pain, I don't necessarily think that's the best route to go.
Harkening back to '88, I remember being a young Liberal in Goose Bay, Labrador, where I grew up, and I got chosen to go to the Newfoundland and Labrador Provincial Youth Parliament. Well, my God. Airfare included. Big deal when you lived in Labrador, trust me. And I was elected premier, and then for my last session, we could choose what legislation we wanted. And my signature piece of legislation was on free trade with the United States. By the way, provincial youth parliaments are far more civil than the real thing. It was a great disappointment to get elected to go into the House of Commons and harken back for those more mature days when I was 17, surrounded by 17-year-olds. But anyway, it was greatly disappointing to me, having championing free trade at a provincial level, to go to StFX during the election. I think it was in the fall of 1988. For me, the reason why I was an impassioned free trader was it was a demonstration of our confidence as a country, that we could take on the world, that we could be the best. And the way you hone that is taking on the best around the world, particularly the United States. But found out once I got to StFX that I couldn't vote in the election, which Dave Graham, who you met earlier, and a lot of my other close buddies at that time, Dave and I have known each other since those 17-year-old days. They got a great charge that the most impassioned free trader on the StFX campus couldn't even vote in the goddamn bloody election. It was for me a demonstration of confidence. Since then, we have built on that. I mean, even in the past 10 years, we now have a Trans-Pacific free trade agreement. We have a free trade agreement with the European Union. We are the only G7 country to have a free trade agreement with every other G7 country. So we believe in this, and we have built our economy on this. There is something that is even more fundamental to the betrayal that Frank spoke of earlier, and that's how it's described by the Prime Minister now, a betrayal. And now immediately the lessons that we learn from that. For a long time, if you were selling a widget in Canada, it was just far easier to sell it to Michigan. It was far easier just to sell it to the United States because it's right there. And because we had an agreement that we agreed upon in writing on several occasions, but most recently with the man who is now president again. And with the stroke of a pen and with the ripping up of some paper, it's gone. We believe in peace, order, and good government in this country. That is a value. And suddenly we find the rug pulled out from underneath us. So one of the things I think we'll get into, and I won't go on any longer, but one of the things we are going to get into over the next few minutes, and I think, frankly, over the next few years, is what do we do now in this world? What do we do?
Well, let's get into it then. Oh, Frank.
Well, Lisa said something and just reminded me of a tiny point I wanted to make, and that's the Gordie Howe Bridge process between Windsor and Detroit, right? The U.S. auto workers, to my dismay and contempt, have come out in support of President Trump's agenda around autos, basically betraying their Canadian brothers and sisters, and I think betraying themselves as well. But the one thing that I want you to note is that there are 1,500 doctors and nurses cross the border every single day from Windsor to Detroit to look after those auto workers where they are. And during COVID, when Michigan had more deaths than all of Canada, our 1,500 workers were in those hospitals every day looking after the people of Michigan. So I think it's important that we remind America, when it comes to equities flow both ways.
Agreed.
I mean, it'll be a very interesting ceremony this summer when that bridge opens. It'll be fascinating to see who shows up.
I hope so.
How friendly they are.
I hope so. And I may get invited depending upon who wins the federal election. That'd be awesome.
But I just want to reinforce the point Frank made. I mean, the last position I held was as Minister of Labor. Lisa held that portfolio as well. When we were, during COVID, when walls were being erected between our two countries, the allies that we could count on were unions. And particularly during the Biden administration, the unions there had direct access to the Oval Office. So we could make sure that the trade corridors remained open. We could make sure we were communicating with one another, because these union brothers and sisters allied together were brothers and sisters across that border. That, for the United Auto Workers right now, is gone. It is a deep betrayal of their brothers and sisters in Canada, and the dust hasn't even settled yet on that.
If we could then maybe turn to the border, because Frank, during your time as ambassador, there was obviously a lot of concern about the thickening of the border. Lisa, when you were in government, the thickening of the border was a major issue, and there was the Security and Prosperity Partnership and the Beyond the Border Initiative and all these sort of acronyms and things. But we're seeing, I think, thickening of the border now as well. So what would your past experience sort of inform maybe how a future government should proceed with border issues?
Well, I was in Washington after Canada made the decision, as it turns out, very appropriately, not to go into Iraq with the United States. So Bush was very respectful about that. He said, "Your country, your choice." Rumsfeld and Cheney were not. They were hostile. So we had lots of hostility to deal with. But the extraordinary work that was done by John Manley and Tom Ridge on the U.S. side after 9/11 helped create a loosening of border restrictions that started right after 9/11. So over time, I would say that we were systematically able to reduce those border restrictions. You can have NAFTA immigration status now. Our company in New Brunswick, we manufacture kitchen cabinets, put them on a truck in Shediac, and they show up in Boston, and they hardly even stop at the border. So the border is quite seamless up until now. But now we're seeing a whole new set of requirements. Canadians are very worried about their papers being checked, about their electronics being checked. And we've had some terrible examples that have not been good. And the end result of that, along with the rhetoric of the president, which basically is saying to us, not only am I going to betray you, but you're worthless. You contribute nothing to this marriage. You're worthless. And we know that's not the case, dramatically not the case. So right now, for a variety of reasons, Canadians aren't going to the U.S. There were 500,000 fewer trips in January than there were the year before. Airline bookings are down 70% across the border. There's going to be a dramatic drop in the tourism dollars spent in the United States. And by the way, Canada spends 31% of those dollars. And if we repatriate that so that only 10% of Canadians who were going internationally, mainly to the US, come to Canada, that will add 1% to our GDP and 75,000 jobs. So Canadians, there's a big message here. Vote with your feet, which is what they're doing.
I just wanted to add to that. Right now, cross-border traffic of Canadians going into the United States is at COVID levels. What's really important to remember here is that wasn't by some government decree or dictum. That's individual Canadians making those choices. That is extraordinarily powerful. I mean, I can tell you, shortly after Trump decided he was just going to shred a free trade agreement that he signed and had a heavy hand in designing, but shred up anyway, my husband, who runs a hotel here in Toronto, just said, we're buying local. Switched all his suppliers. Yeah. Nobody told him to do it. I didn't tell him to do it. Very happy he did it. And millions of people are making that decision. I think for those of us who've been around a bit, this is one of the most extraordinary individual acts of patriotism I have seen. I agree. It is amazing. Now, what do we do with that positive energy? That's one of the questions, I think probably the most important question in this election. But it's something that I invite all of you, really think about. What do we do with that? Because it's amazing. I mean, it's like one sustained big hockey game, but with very, very tangible results here, right? It will determine the future of this country. We know we can't take anything for granted anymore. And yet, instead of being insular, we have decided we're going to take on the world, and we're going to be there for one another, and we're going to support our own businesses, and we're going to knock down things like, I mean, this sounds very wonkish, but I'm in a room with a lot of wonks, so, you know, a lot of people interested in policy. Internal trade barriers has been the nemesis of this country. Provinces and territories just could not agree on this subject. Mark Carney walks into a room of premiers and says, we're going to get it done. Had an agreement in a day, we'll get it done by July 1st. Now, that's amazing. I mean, we'll see. And some of it I will give to the Prime Minister. But listen, anybody who has had to deal with premiers knows that does not come easily. That does not come easily. Even the notion of agreeing to that does not come easily. So we got to make sure that they follow through on that, because I think that that's very important. And people are right to snicker because we've been down this road before. But there is a momentum in this country and a feeling that we may actually be able to do these things that we've been putting off for far too long.
I'm going to talk about border thickening. 2013 to 15, I was Minister of Transport, and our big push at the time was to get more Canadians to sign up for the Nexus card because we wanted people to go back and forth across the border. It was fantastic. Flash forward to today, where, you know, it's not just the fact that we're going to have more impediments on trade, and you've got a lot of rhetoric happening at the White House level. The issue is that each one of these Customs and Border Patrol officers are individuals, and there is a thing called petty bureaucracy that can happen. It's up to that individual Border Patrol guard in that moment to ask as many questions as they want to ask of you, and ask for your telephone, ask for your computer, ask you to open it up, go through it. And unfortunately, Frank, the issue with not as many people going to Canada is they have a lot of time right now to ask these 10 or 15 questions. And that's a little uncomfortable and it's a little rattling. So when we say Canadians are choosing not to go, I mean, my son's supposed to go and watch his friend play in his final D1 softball or baseball, whatever it is. Sorry, I should know what that is. But anyway, he's supposed to go down to Ohio and watch it. And I said to him, dude, leave your phone at home, because I don't know what's in that phone, and I don't know what kind of conversations you're having with your friends that could suddenly cause you to not be deemable to be able to be allowed to go into the United States of America. I mean, just going from 2013, trying to get more people to sign up for Nexus to the point where I'm counseling my son about what to take to the border. And it's not like we're going to China, we're going to the United States, but the danger and the issue is there, and we all have to be cognizant of that as well. And I just want to say one thing on trade, interprovincial trade barriers, and I'm really sorry for doing this because I love your province, but we talk about interprovincial trade, but in the province of Newfoundland and Labrador, you have a very real trade barrier, and it has to do with bottling of consumable beverages known as beer. And in order to sell beer in Newfoundland and Labrador, you got to bottle it there. Well, interprovincial trade would mean that you don't have to bottle it there anymore, and there's 150 good jobs that are going to go. There's the rhetoric.
Beer is sacred, Lisa. This is different.
I know, and that's what your premier said. But you've been to FPTs, federal, provincial, territorial meetings, where you want to sort out what's happening at the table, and then your deputy minister hands you the list of the things you're not allowed to give up because you're going to lose X amount of jobs. So I would just encourage you, if the politicians, of which I am not one anymore, and I'm not looking at my friend Caroline Mulroney because I'm not talking to her. But if the politicians want to talk about how they're going to get interprovincial trade sorted out, then push them on it, because it's so easy to say you're going to do it and then just walk away. And you mentioned John Manley, so I have to tell you what Anne McClellan always tells me, that John Manley has worked on interprovincial trade barriers in this country so long, that's the reason why his hair turned white.
I could see that. But by the way, your beer is an issue. You know, Moosehead said it's easier to sell beer in Nevada than it is in Newfoundland.
And there we go. And now we start the Atlantic-Canada fight. Nova Scotia, Newfoundland.
And it's become a bang up on Newfoundland beer. It's but the point of it is this. The point of it is that it came from the ground up, right? It's like any momentum to feel on international trade barriers or any of these things is coming from Canadians, and leaders are feeling the heat. That's the point.
That is the point.
And keep the pressure on.
Yeah.
I mean, we have seen this sort of rallying around the flag. Obviously, the uptick in kind of popular kind of nationalism across the country, and former Prime Minister Stephen Harper, I think in a very full-throated kind of defense of Canada, said we should sort of pay any price, bear any burden, economically, to maintain our sovereignty. But I guess, do you think Canadians will be willing to do that, I guess, when push comes to shove in 6 months maybe? And what will that speak to reactions across the country, different provincial premiers, different regions with different economic interests willing to pay some of those costs, perhaps in other regions not?
Well, my answer would be hell yes. I was really proud of Prime Minister Harper when he said that, because it went further almost than anybody else been saying. We need to be able to endure any pain in order to protect our country. I was very proud of that. And by the way, I think all of our Canadian leaders have had their best moments in the last month or two. Trudeau has had his best moments on the way out of office. Poilievre, I think, made an extraordinary speech. I think the premiers have. I'm very proud of the way premiers have been standing up. All of that to say that I think they've read the mood of the room. You know, when the real pain comes, who knows? But I do think it's important to say this. We have 40 million people now wearing Team Canada jerseys. And I don't have to tell you, when you go to the NHL, when they talk about how proud they are of their team and everything else, but every one of them wants to wear their jersey in the Olympics, their country jersey. There's a new level of pride. And in Canada now, every Canadian is wearing the Canadian jersey. And every Canadian is prepared to make sacrifice because of this very simple thing. We are fighting for the sovereignty of our country, a country that we deeply care about, and we're prepared to fight for it, and we're prepared to take pain for it. And the reason we're going to win is because in the United States, they have no idea what the hell they're fighting for. They're not wearing their Team US jersey, and they're not prepared to take the same amount of pain that we are. It's not the dog in the fight, it's fighting the dog. And the Canadian dog's got a lot of fight in it right now.
I can't beat that.
I think in the US, this may become an irritant. They may just notice that eggs or Easter eggs or all these things are getting more expensive. And, at some point, they may ask why, right? Their pain threshold is not as great as ours. There is a known, we all know. I think it's, if you go back through Canadian history, we've been here before, and it's not like everybody's paying attention to Canadian history of the 1890s, but we were there, right? And Sir John A. knew what to do and put up reciprocal tariffs, and suddenly our agricultural exports to the UK went up 4 times, right? We knew what to do. We concentrated on new markets. We diversified. People rallied behind the flag, right? People may not necessarily be paying attention to Canadian history right now, but what they know now and what they knew then, it's what it's like to share your border with the biggest power in the world. And when that elephant rolls over and you're that mouse, you feel it, you know it, and inherently, intrinsically, Canadians know it, and they're willing to fight for it. And that was their first and most natural instinct. There is going to be pain. And I don't think anybody actually is blind to that. I don't think anybody's putting on the jersey thinking that there's no conditions attached. I think people know it. But the fact of the matter is, it is our country that's for stake. It is our country. It is the existence of our country. That is something we never thought we'd have to fight for before. But boy, people are willing to do it. It's this latent patriotism in this country that is now exhibiting itself is a beautiful thing.
What then in terms of the kind of future of Canada-US relations? Obviously, Mr. Carney has talked about in comments last week about a sort of a resetting of the relationship, a way to rethink the relationship. I mean, he might not be prime minister, but he might be prime minister after the end of the month or next month. For a future government, I guess, how do you sort of proceed with Mr. Trump? Again, someone who believes in tariffs. It's the most beautiful word. Independence Day, he says, is coming in 2 days or 3 days when he'll impose a lot of tariffs on us and the rest of the world. And he's obviously someone who you can't really make a written agreement with, I think. His 2 ex-wives, I think, would say so, and certainly the CUSMA agreement. But how do you, I guess, proceed in terms of negotiations with someone like that, I suppose, who has an outdated view on tariffs and over to you, Lisa.
Yeah, I should have picked up on that last question, I guess. And so I wouldn't have to go first on this one. That's okay. He's got 4 more years at least, because he says he wants another term today. So whatever plan we have has to be long lasting. And I heard, you know what, the best I would say analogy that I heard was, if you're on a plane and you hit turbulence, you can't get off the plane. You just kind of have to ride through it. And that's kind of where we are. Like, we can't land a plane. We've got to actually work with whatever is happening in terms of this turbulence. So what do? Any prime minister knows, and we learned that from the Right Honorable Brian Mulroney, that the most important relationship is the one between the Canadian Prime Minister and the U.S. President. That's job one. I mean, and as a result, whoever wins is going to have to figure out a way through their team to work with the administration in the United States. It doesn't mean that you're on bended knee. It doesn't mean that you're turtling. It doesn't mean that you're not standing up for Canada. But there has to be a semblance of figuring out a way in which to negotiate and work with the other side. But also be mindful of the fact that it may be 2 years for it to come to fruition, and that it's going to be a long period of time. And I'm not a big fan of saying what sectors are going to have to give and what sectors aren't going to have to give. Quite frankly, I think that's a conversation we're having in Canada ourselves. I also don't like it when one part of the country promises another part of the country's livelihood in terms of what is okay to give up. So I know agriculture gets mad because we're saving the auto sector, but the auto sector is so important to southwestern Ontario. So everything has to be looked at in its individual, but also as across the federation. So I guess the advice to all the teams, whoever it's going to be, is that you have to find a path in order to have some kind of negotiations, and you draw on the expertise of Frank McKenna, of Derek Burney, of Gary Dewar, of all the people who have worked in Washington, who still have connections, the Business Council of Canada, through university presidents. There's all kinds of ways in which to go across the border and shore up those kinds of relationships, because it's not just about fighting all the time. Sometimes you have to talk through it as well.
Yeah, famously, when we had to confront shortly after we were elected as a government in 2015 as a Liberal government, and Donald Trump was elected for his first term as president, I think it was only a matter of months before we called Brian Mulroney, former prime minister, obviously, into the cabinet, into the Liberal cabinet, to come up with a strategy with how we would deal with this. This is decidedly different in its tone and in its substance, Trump 2.0. This is very different. I was on the Canada-US Cabinet Committee every day, waking up wondering, what the heck did he say now? And that is the real problem. Lisa's absolutely right. We gotta dance with the one who brung us, in the sense that, look, we are, and our economy still, for the most part, function day to day, working together. We just don't know what tomorrow is going to be, or for that matter, this afternoon, right? We have a problem in that we have a president who tore up his own agreement, and who is doing that in all sorts of different ways. So it's very difficult for people in the room, many of whom I know are involved in business in some way, shape, or form. You require certainty. You require that when you sign something with somebody, that you're both going to abide by what you signed. We are dealing with a president now who doesn't do that. How do we get through day by day by day? And Lisa's absolutely right. Listen to all voices. This is an issue in which I think all Canadians can get behind.
So I think that statement of Mark Carney deserves a lot of attention, and I think going forward it'll be reread in our history books, because it wasn't just saying we have to get through the moment. It was saying that we have to change the future. It was very powerful, a challenge to the country. We've always had a raucous relationship with the United States of America. They've been our best friends, our allies. They've been our neighbors, but we've always had back and forth. We always will. But we have to remember, they're the only neighbor we have. We can't change our geography. It's not like we can pick up and move. So we have to learn to live with our neighbor. That's just fact. And we can talk about a lot of other things, and I will in a second, but we do also have to have a peaceful relationship with our neighbor. That's just fact. Robin Williams, I thought, said it best. came here, the comedian. He said, "I feel sorry for you Canadians. It's like a nice family living over a biker bar," and it definitely feels like that at the moment. But we'll get through that. But what Carney was saying, and I think what most Canadians have come to conclude now, is something much more permanent in nature. We're going to have to, I'm going to deliberately misquote Ronald Reagan, we're going to have to trust but diversify. And by that, I mean that we'll continue to do great things with the United States, but we do have to find ways of adding value within Canada. Breaking down interprovincial trade barriers adds percentage points to our GDP. Getting pipelines and ports and getting access to world markets will save this country tens of billions of dollars. We give up, Andrew, how much is it on oil every day that we ship a barrel across? 800 million a year? A day. We give up because we discount our oil to go to the United States because it's the only market we have. So we've got to have other markets. Will the United States be our biggest? Yeah. But the only way to keep them honest is to have other markets. We have to do that with gas. We have to do that with aluminum. Why the Americans are tariffing us on aluminum at 25%, I don't know. We send 70% of their aluminum is from Canada. There's only one person getting screwed in this, and that's Americans. But I don't know why they're doing that, but we need to divert that cargo elsewhere. We need to find ways of getting softwood lumber to Asia, for example. We need to spend more of our tourism dollars at home, have a major campaign to bring people spending money. So we need to trust but diversify. The United States is not going to go away, but we need to take away their leverage on us. And I believe that we can systematically do that, and we have the tools in our chest to do that.
I have an app on my phone called Oil Price Daily that gives me that difference every single day, ever since I was Minister of Energy and Natural Resources. And I can say, before that, I was Minister of Indigenous Services. We had to set up a special cabinet committee to figure out what we were doing wrong to get TMX built. And clearly it was because we were just railroading, as it were, our way through Indigenous communities. But once we got that right, I'm very proud to say one of my proudest moments in my public career was to break ground on TMX, because that was always about diversification of our product. And I come from an oil producing province. So let me tell you, I added some spice to cabinet meetings and caucus meetings on this issue, especially when after 2019, I was the only cabinet minister from an oil producing province. One of the things I did was start meeting regularly every week with 3 former ministers of natural resources from the West, because it is so important to the West, right? To Jim Carr, Amarjeet Sohi, and to Ralph Goodale, who's now our High Commissioner in the UK. But it's pretty darn important to Newfoundland, okay? 50% of our gross domestic product, oil and gas royalties. It's only about 28% for Alberta. So I got skin in the game. That's what I would argue. And the sooner we come to the grips as a country, I always counted this as our national mission. Our mission now has changed to something more existential, but just trying to figure out how we do the right thing by our energy, but understanding and being proud of the fact that we are the 4th largest producers of oil and gas in the world. That's a big deal. We told a whole bunch of workers how to go out west. We said, figure out how to get oil out of sand. By God, they did it. And out my way, I used to write the speeches for Brian Tobin back when Frank was Premier of New Brunswick, Brian was Premier of Newfoundland and Labrador. We struck first oil in Hibernia. We didn't know what the heck we were doing. Now Newfoundlanders are flying all over the world, Mongolia, Mozambique in their 20s, because ExxonMobil calls offshore Newfoundland the harshest environment they operate in the world. And yet we've done it. We've done it. So we have to think about important, we can't get high and mighty about what we do and do not do, okay? We have to understand and be proud of what we do. Natural resources in this country are incredibly important, and some of the best jobs that you could ever have are found in the natural resources sector. We got to protect them, we got to diversify them, and one of the best ways we could do that was by building a pipeline that went out to Asian markets.
Wait a second, but let's make sure that TMX is not the last pipeline that we build in the country, right? Wouldn't you agree with me on that? Like, can we get an agreement here? Because the way it's set up right now, it's not a lot of hope to get it done. Thank you for getting TMX done.
And line 3. But let's also be very careful that we make sure that we are all in it together and our eyes are wide open to all the product that we have. Because for all the talk that we make about building a pipeline to the east, let's also make sure that we understand Newfoundland and Labrador produces a lot of oil, sweet light crude, some of the least emitting oil in the world. And we should look at ways in which we can refine that domestically, because there are ways we can do that right now. Boats pull up to those rigs and they just bring it to wherever the market will get the highest dollar. Well, how can we do that and refine that product in the country? That's how we have to start thinking, not only about breaking down the barriers, but seeing the assets and the liabilities, sometimes the challenges of every single part of this country, and understanding that Newfoundland and Labrador produces more than just beer. It produces very good oil.
I mean, we have, plans.
I don't want to have the fight with them about pipelines in Canada, do you? I know.
I ended up burning out my brain on Energy East, led that in Saguenay, LNG, and
Northern Gateway,
Mountain. So
Port of Quebec.
At some point, we just got to stop talking and start building.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What I mean, we want to build pipelines. We want to build new port infrastructure. We want to add some things in our Arctic. We want to boost defense spending. We want to give tax cuts to the middle class. We obviously are facing perhaps job losses, on a mass scale. There's potential for stagflation, one of those, naughty words from our past. How do we pay for all of this, given perhaps the kind of economic uncertainty that's coming up and perhaps strains on government budgets, not just federally, but provincially, I suppose, too?
Well, let me say this. The only country, or the country least equipped to pay for this, is the United States of America. Our deficit is 2.2% of our GDP. Theirs is 7%. And they're headed towards the cliff a lot quicker than we are. But it makes the case for fiscal probity. I just have to advertise this. Back in the Chrétien Martin days, they actually hit the wall. And as a result of that, did draconian things. I tell you, as a premier, I felt it. And we ended up balancing the budget, paying down the debt, lowering taxes, less money going out in interest to money that was borrowed, and created that serendipitous situation that has allowed Canada, even up to this day, to be fiscally more capable of handling this kind of a burden than most places. Now, I still think we have to be fiscally prudent and watch what we do, but we were able during COVID to reach into the piggy bank and pay the way, and we're going to have to do it here too.
And recognize that the only pocket isn't just the taxpayer's pocket. Like, look at the people in the room who are investors for a living, and recognize that the private sector has a very strong role to play here as well. We are in these beautiful space courtesy of IMCO, which is the which is an Ontario pension plan, of which I'm on the board of directors. So full disclosure on that one. That's why they're so great, by the way. And it's wonderful that they're letting us use their space today. But what you hear a lot from individuals who invest in this country is, make it worth our while, make it easier to invest here. So let's make it easier as a country to have that private sector investment, that public pension money. Absolutely. If it is a good deal, we will find the good deals. We will invest in the good deals. But you don't do it for the sake of saying you're Canadian, we're Canadian, you should invest here. You got to make it so that the deal is actually something that's going to give you the return on investment going into the future, with the double bang of making sure that you're going to be helping on the infrastructure side. So it's not just always about taxpayers, but I wouldn't be me if I didn't point out the fact that the government in the last 10 years has certainly exceeded a fiscal responsibility that we should make sure that we take a hard look at in terms of reining back in the spending. There's no question that we do have deficits that are structural in nature, and it does mean that there is going to be, I would say, losses of positions predominantly in Ottawa, but we are way too big for the amount of work that's being done in Canada. And as a result, I would say that is a place that you can take a look at from a fiscal point of view.
Amen. Yeah, amen. And I think that the Prime Minister, what he's been signaling so far, and when I say the Prime Minister, I'm talking Mark Carney. I'm getting used to that too now. It's only been a few weeks.
It's only for a couple more weeks.
Wow.
Good shot.
No, it's not. But Mark, I think there's a big difference between, and he may end up formalizing this. He's indicated he may, but there's a big difference between the operational cost of running a government, which has gotten too high, and areas in which we may be able to invest. This is going to cost money, like everything that we've talked about. All this goodwill, trade corridors, getting through red tape, making sure that we can get things built again in this country is going to cost some money. It is. So we got to brace ourselves for that too. But this is an existential crisis that we have not faced in our lifetime. We just have not seen anything like this before. So while there has to be guardrails, most certainly, I would say to you, let your imaginations run wild on what we need to do, because every good idea right now has to be heard.
But not funded.
Good ideas will need to be funded right now.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
We've got about 10 minutes left, so I want to turn a bit to the election. And I want to phrase this very carefully because at least I don't want to get you in trouble. But you asked, or you answered a few minutes ago, you used an airplane analogy.
Yeah.
And another conservative gave a speech last week where he also used an airplane analogy. And this is Corey Tinecki, of course. Yeah, okay.
I think it was his plane was crashing in the scenario. Yeah. Mine's just in a little turbulence.
Okay, fair enough. So I don't want to ask you about that, but I want to say, look, in terms of people here, what is the ballot question? Is it Trump? Is it about Canada? Is it a mix of things?
Yeah, it's a total mix. For people who want, and I think you can take a look at the polling. It's breaking down demographically. For a certain age group of which I belong, it really is about who's the best to lead vis-a-vis Trump and tariffs. No question about it. And that's getting a lot of play out there. But for people under 30, it's not. It's about cost of living and housing. That's what so you're going to see parties trying to straddle both of those kinds of things. And I think that makes a lot of sense, but there's a lot of time left in this election, and campaigns do matter. And it's funny, I was asked it on another panel, what is the one thing that you would worry about in a campaign? And my worry is always about candidates, because you never know how good the vetting was on a candidate and what is going to happen. And invariably, people are going to pop up. And, right now the Liberals are dealing with their candidate issue. We had a guy who peed in a mug during the campaign. Joanne, you remember that? And we dealt with it definitively. It's like he was gone. No problem. We weren't going to win that seat anyway, but he was gone. But this time we have an actual sitting member of parliament he was caught in this one. So these things are going to pop up along the way, and that's going to cause the leader to not be on the talking point they want to be on for the day. Give you an example. Today, Mark Carney came out and he had, I thought, a very impressive housing announcement. Build homes, kind of taking stuff away from CMHC, setting up another bureaucracy that was going to get out there and build some homes. 9 questions. Not one of them was on that topic. You know what all the questions were on? It was on this individual candidate, and it was on Bill 96 in Quebec, 96 or 91, 96 in Quebec. That was it. So leaders are going to have to deal with these things as they go along. Mr. Poilievre, people want to ask him about what Corey Tinecki said at the Empire Club, right? And he's going to have to deal with that question as he made his announcement today that had to do with creating this national infrastructure pathway corridor across the country for telecommunications, for transmission, for oil and gas. So they still have to penetrate and get out to the people that matter. The last thing I would say is, as much as people want to downplay these 5,000 person rallies that are happening of conservatives, I got to tell you, if you can convince a conservative to leave their house and go to a rally, that's a pretty remarkable thing. And all that says to me is their vote is set. They are going to vote. They're probably going to vote in an advanced poll, and they're going to get it in the bag right away. You may be polling ahead in terms of the Liberal race right now, but they may not show up to vote. They just may not show up to vote and may all disappear. So it ain't over till it's over. And that's my pitch.
There's not much that I disagree with there, except your final conclusion. It cuts both ways. Older people are clearly on the ballot question of Trump in the U.S., but older people are the ones who vote. Mm-hmm. Younger people may be more on affordability issues, but they're a little less motivated to vote. I will say this. I think this contest is far from over. I think that the Conservatives are more energized. The Poilievre people are more energized, not dissimilar to the Trump people. Large rallies, highly energized people. I think that's the case. I think there's more money in the bank and 4 years to organize. So those are all advantages. Mark Carney, on the other hand, is new. He's kind of the only new person here. And quite frankly, he looks prime ministerial and he acts prime ministerial. And when the issue is Trump, Carney looks good. When the issue is political, I think he's got all kinds of weaknesses. But he's got no politics, believe it or not, requires a certain amount of experience and skill and training. You need these little spidey senses as you go through the forest that protect you from the creatures that want to eat you. And Carney doesn't have those instincts yet. I'd put it this way. I think he'd be superb. Look, you couldn't take from central casting a person with better credentials to be a prime minister at this moment in time. I think he could be a superb prime minister. Terrible opposition leader. If he were to lose, I'd just say, forget it. He's going to be a terrible opposition leader. On the other hand, I think that Pierre Poilievre is a really good opposition leader. Maybe none better. He communicates well. He's got sound bites. He knows his stuff. He's slick. He's very good political instincts and so on. He's a terrific politician. And the question will be, can he make the transition in the minds of people to being a prime minister? So,
well, you guys like our policies. You keep stealing them from us. So there's that.
I actually like your policies too. But there's nothing wrong with two people being in the center of the spectrum, which is where we should be in Canada anyway.
Here. Yeah.
Well, it's been a while since we've been there.
It's been a while.
I would say it's very nimble cherry picking. But let me just say this.
Oh.
Look, what we have seen in the past 6 weeks is extraordinary, right? The issue coming out of COVID, and we're not over COVID. I always say that. In Newfoundland, we have a saying, my nerves are rub raw. Everybody's nerves are still rub raw. We just got through a pandemic. It altered our lives in the most substantial of ways to the point where we feared each other's company. We're going to be a while getting over this one, let alone the thousands of people who died. Coming out of that, we get inflation, which just exacerbated things that we knew were going to happen anyway. A housing shortage, for instance, affordability issues were paramount. If you are a government who's been in for 10 years, the writing was and should really be on the wall. And yet here we are. A 2-year sustained 25-point gap between the Liberal government and the Conservative opposition closed, and now the Liberals in the lead. And a lot of polling right now could change. Campaigns change a lot. But right now, saying that we will have a majority government. Now, it ain't affordability alone, for sure. It is Trump. It is all Trump. Trump is the question. And so what the other parties have to do is show their nimbleness to meet that moment. If in an affordability campaign, who would ever think that a 2-time central banker would be the guy to meet the moment? But in this world that we exist in right now, where we know we are going to face some heavy winds, here is a guy who managed us through the 2008 recession better than any other country. This is a guy who managed the UK through Brexit. And this is a guy who comes with the commendations of the Conservative government of the day, Prime Minister Harper, and the Conservative government of the UK, both of whom put him in those positions. It's pretty unique qualifications right now. That, and as Frank said, and actually as a friend of mine once said to me about Mark Carney, he looks like the dad who broke up the house party. It's not a bad look. He's got a great sense of humor, but he looks like a serious man. And Canada has rarely faced a more serious time. So that is what Canadians are resonating. That's how you see a 25-point gap close in the course of 6 to 7 weeks. It is an extraordinary thing.
I completely disagree.
On that?
Are you going to run? Because it's happening a lot lately.
Sean Fraser was meant to be here.
Anita and Ann sends her best wishes too.
Anita and Ann, I know. And in both cases, my husband called or looked at me and went, "Is there anything you'd like to say?"
I actually did think of you and Steve, and I thought he'll kill him.
Lisa knows my husband very well. I married a Greek Montrealer. My life is in my hands for sure.
I knew we were safe. You were going to stay.
Yeah.
Well, Scott Bryson is clawing his way back. He's now in the PMO, I think, isn't he?
He's on the plane.
He's on the plane.
Are you kidding me?
No, he left BMO and took a leave, and he's on the plane. And I think he wanted to be a candidate in Nova Scotia, even. Came close.
Don't look at me that way, Frank.
I'm so glad I'm learning this. That's amazing. So, well, I can guarantee you I'm not running. Well, and not because I don't like the leader. I just kind of like my life.
Yeah, I get that.
Well, on that happy note, I think we're done.
Questions from the floor?
Oh, so questions from the floor. Oh, never mind.
Oh, yeah. We got to
keep these.
We asked for submitted questions, and we got a couple. So
questions and speeches about conservatism, yes. Always welcome.
The first question we got submitted was around complacency in the Canadian economy and just being good enough. And what are steps that our panelists feel that individuals, businesses, and government can do to break free of that complacency that we've kind of been accused of over the past number of years?
Boy, I'm just going to tackle that head on. I think that we've lived in a comfortable pew way too long. I think we've been complacent way too long. We've been hewers of wood, of drawers of water, and we've had a good living without raising too much of a sweat. And I think we've got a big wake-up call, and when the history of this country is written, Donald Trump will have a whole chapter to himself on how he changed the Canada that we live in and made it a better place. Because we have to compete, and we have to get better, and our governments have to be better than they are. Yeah. And they have to give us the tools to get to market. And if, we talked about, we don't want to blow the fiscal framework, but we need things like accelerated depreciation allowance, investment tax credits that you really only get if you spend money. So you really shouldn't take it as a drawdown on the Treasury. You should consider it an incentive to the economy. We've just got to stop being so loosey-goosey, lack of initiative, and get out there and compete in the world now. And so I think we've got ourselves a wake-up call that I hope will turn this country around.
I build on what Frank said. I would say, look, we have signed a whole bunch of free trade agreements the past 10 years, a number of which we inherited from the previous government. I mean, this is but it is something since 1988 and that election in which Brian Mulroney won a majority government based on the confidence of this country and our ability to trade around the world. It has been a tenet between these two parties that free trade was always the right way to go.
But we're not taking advantage of it.
But we're not, exactly. And what we find with the CETA agreement with the European Union or the Trans-Pacific Trans-Pacific partnership that we have with Pacific Rim nations is they're all taking advantage of it, but we are not. So now is the time, I think, for us to take advantage of it in a very, very confident way. I mean, I just think back to, that famous ad that John Turner aired for the Liberal Party back in 1988. Where they showed the border between Canada and the US and an eraser comes out and the border's erased, right? We were confident enough to say, no, that is not the case. We can trade with the United States and we can become a better and our own country. So this rattles us a bit, but let's not forget that confidence that we demonstrated in 1988 when we elected Brian Mulroney with a massive majority based on free trade and our confidence as a nation.
Regulatory reform. Just prevent people from saying no all the time is the default position in this country.
But look, you're so right. We've got to figure out in government how to get to yes instead of how to get to no.
Agreed.
And it takes a whole attitude change.
Yeah.
And by the way, Margaret Atwood said, I think the most apt thing about the border, she said the border is like a one-way mirror. We see the United States and they see the United States.
Fair enough. You've got all the great lines.
They're fantastic lines. And I want to close it off by saying,
are you closing up?
I am going to close.
Oh my gosh! I thought we were going to get more quiet. I have
flies.
Can I just use my favorite line? I've been waiting for something.
Go on, please.
My favorite quote. My favorite quote is from Mike Tyson, which is, "Everyone has a plan until you get punched in the face," which is exactly what we're facing right now.
My favorite quote is from Richard Hatfield. He said, "Politics is the most fun you can have with your clothes on."
Friends,
And on that note, Andy.
thank you.
I got nothing.
Thank you. That's unusual, Seamus. That's unusual. Friends, this is why the world needs more StFX. What you've heard today is the essence of what we do. We don't always agree, but we find ways to move forward. We're here to help build Canada. That's what our school does. That's what these leaders have done throughout their careers. And I thank you for everything you've done. Thank you. What have I learned today? What have I learned today? We're on an aircraft, a lot of turbulence. We can't land. But I'm going to jump to a sports analogy. In my life as a soccer player, I never got to pick the field. But we did turn up to play. And I know the jersey we'll be wearing. Team Canada. Thank you very much.